Hi, this is a two-parter, and this is the second installment. So if you haven't watched part 1, Bon Victoriage, episode 13, I'd actually recommend that you pause here and go back to watch the previous installment, where you'll properly get introduced to our main guests. Now those are Charles, a scholar of medieval demonology, and Teresa, a new and fabulous volunteer at the Carr House, the birthplace of Victoria's most famous painter, Emily Carr, which we'll be visiting with her in today's episode. Highlights of our previous chapter included a tour of Wentworth Villa, created by Charles, some talk on the pedicab about Victoria's European roots, and then we went to the Ross Bay Villa, a very fascinating place with a very fascinating storyteller and tour guide, Catherine McAllister, the president of the Ross Bay Villa Society. Both of these are essentially standalone episodes, but for a fuller perspective on why Victoria is such a unique and beautiful city of architecture, I do think it's worth, watching both. As we catch up with our intrepid explorers, us, they are just leaving the Ross Bay Villa and reflecting on the experience. So, if I understand right, that's the first time you've been there?
It's the first time I've been inside. I've gone past it many, many times.
Exactly, yeah. The detailing is beautiful, especially the period furnitures and that type of thing.
I know you two are getting ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they have, in some ways, they've done something that we can't do because we have the additional requirement of being a museum of,
Right.
of Victorian architecture.
Now we're actually at the first of your stops, Teresa, because we're doing a time travel from the death to the birth of Emily Carr.
Exactly. And so Emily Carr was born in 1871 and died in 1945. And the wonderful thing about the James Bay area is you can actually, her whole life was within a stone's throw away.
There will be some people watching this who maybe don't know who Emily Carr is, so while we're at her grave...
I would have never have imagined.
I know! So, just for those people, who is this person whose grave we are now checking out?
Emily Carr was a prolific artist as well as author, and a lot of people don't know about her as an author, but her books are really, I would encourage people to read them. Many of them are about her life as well as, her paintings. So Carr House has several artifacts, but of course they don't have any of her original paintings, but they can be seen at the Victoria Art Gallery, as well as, a large percentage of her artwork is at the Vancouver Art Gallery and the National Gallery as well.
I guess so many of the people we're talking about today, Emily Carr included, but also Roscoe, actually.
We
are
buried
here.
Henriella died in a canoeing accident at Burrard Inlet. His body wasn't recovered. But we have at Wentworth Villa, we have a gravestone from Ross Bay Cemetery, the grave of one Innocentio Baccazioni. It somehow ended up being nabbed from Ross Bay Villa and ended up being used as a paving stone in the back garden of Wentworth Villa.
Weird.
Very odd.
Yeah, very odd. Shockingly odd.
But this kind of pilfering of gravestones for stone was not uncommon
But I mean, actually, that does speak to something very, very common, although in a very weird way, which is the repurposing of historic things for totally other purposes.
Yes.
And it just shows that even cemeteries are not immune to that.
Of course.
I mean, downtown, you've got stuff like the Bard and Banker, a historic bank that really banks on its reputation of having been. Yeah, but now, I mean, seriously, it's about like a person who used to work at the bank, but today it's a place where, 19-year-olds go to drink. And you have so many buildings like that in Victoria.
In fact, even just banks on Government Street.
Yeah.
Next door to that is what's now Monroe's Bookstore, which is a Temple Bank building that was built by Tom Hooper. And about one block down, I think it's the Irish Times pub now, which was a Retbury design. So there's, 4, I think, actually repurposed banks in 2 blocks of Government Street.
That's right, yeah. But you also have that now with churches. There's one actually not far from where I live in Fernwood, and I'm struggling to remember the name right this moment. But they've started using it more as a venue space, like a cultural venue space, than actually as a church.
Do you mean the Belfry?
No, I don't mean the Belfry.
Because
But
the Belfry is like that too.
the Belfry Theatre very much is like that. But there's
Yes.
one that just started like in the last. There's going to be a subtitle here that says what I'm talking about.
I do know the thing you mean, but I also don't remember the name. I mean, one thing I like to try to talk about is the value of heritage rehabilitation as like an environmental measure, right? Because you think these buildings are not built to modern environmental standards, and that's true.
Yeah.
But most of the environmental impacts of a new building come in the construction phase. And so if we can reuse old buildings, it's like much...
Exactly. It ties into the being more green.
But also, I mean, ties into, we're a lot more aware of seismologically where we are than we used to be.
Yes.
And of course, a lot of buildings were not built up to the code of the 21st century, to put it lightly.
They didn't bother with a foundation for Wentworth Villa, for example.
So is that like on your minds actually, like when you are doing restoration work at Wentworth Villa, for example?
It's all being, so there's new modern seismic upgrading that's been done throughout. All of the chimneys and stuff have had seismic reinforcing done. There was some how should we say, differences of opinion during the restoration process about whether that was necessary and appropriate, because you could argue that those represent modern interventions and that, the building stood just fine for 100 and whatever years without them. But in the end, it was decided that making sure it would survive, for another 100 was more important.
Yeah. And during the Carr House renovation, everything was sagging.
Yes.
And they have a huge, metal support beam actually that is holding up the house now that was installed. Yeah.
Yours may have been worse even then.
Yeah, it was quite the restoration process.
I often think about, I'm sorry, this is all very depressing. I went to Christchurch right after they had their big earthquake, and that was another city that really concerned themselves with heritage structures.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's in many respects it's a sister city to Victoria, and one can just hope that it won't become too much of a sister city. I know that a lot of work is being done, but like, would you say that where we're at now, like the Wentworth Villa, is relatively speaking fairly secure now, or is this a kind of thing, or the Carr House?
But with the proviso that, the scale of potential disasters means that nothing can be truly,
of course,
guaranteed, right?
Fires. These are all wooden
Yeah.
buildings.
Oh, yes,
The
yeah,
wood
absolutely.
frame,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a fire suppression system now, but yes, of course, if we had the recent Siberian earthquake, if we had a 9-point-something magnitude earthquake right off coast here,
It may not survive.
the ground it was sitting on might not survive, right? So.
Well, sure.
The Carr House has gone through a fire in the back of the house. The way the Italianate architecture, villa architecture is designed, the utilitarian rooms are at the back. The kitchens, the laundry, what it was in those days, is all at the back of the house. So the house had a flood, the house had a fire. So again, that wreaked havoc on the found, and it was a rental property for a long time. When you see the Ross Bay Villa, the same thing, it's like, once it becomes a rental property, sometimes it's not cared for as it should be. I know you mentioned the lumber
Yes.
because Victoria couldn't
Yeah.
mill the lumber at the time.
Yeah, so
but-
we're sort of culturally very British, but
Yeah,
in
it's-
terms of actual proximity, Vancouver and especially San Francisco are much more available. Panama Canal
Exactly.
hasn't opened yet, right? So
Right, sure.
anything that wants to get here from
Here,
England's
yeah.
got to go around the horn. And
Well, that's just the funny thing about nostalgia. Also, I mean, like, a lot of settlers to Victoria, they looked at the land that was being actually managed and taken care of by Indigenous people, and they were reminded of, English countryside. Now,
Yes.
how much it actually had to do with the English countryside and how much it had to do with just like some individuals feeling homesick.
yes,
And I've often talked about this also, just like when people, also immigrant communities, and I mean, I guess the early settlers to Victoria very much were one of those communities. You come, but like imperceptibly, your concept of what a thing was or is corrupted.
yes.
You're trying to find the best adaptation, and you can't really find that thing, but before you know it, and certainly after a couple generations, the thing you have there is bears little resemblance to what
Yes.
what you were originally going for.
Yeah. And I think that does especially apply to the architecture of Victoria.
Yeah, I mean, even the revival styles are
Oh,
basically
yeah.
doing the thing that you say, right, where they diverge very dramatically over time.
Exactly.
Carpenter Gothic.
Sure, yeah.
When Victoria was being founded, like, we were just getting our first photographs, and for that reason, you would do at the very least, you have like a lot of vintage photographs that, for example, can be displayed on electric boxes all over the city, right? And so you have like these little clues that you can go on and do the detective work to maybe be able to do a little bit better than you could have historically.
We certainly at Wentworth have benefited from the fact that particularly the women of the Ella family seem to really appreciate getting their photographs taken. So we have lots of photos of the Ellas and of Wentworth from them.
Yeah, and the Carr House too has several, family photos and of the Carr family. So it's well documented, as is Emily, which is
Emily in particular.
yeah.
So well documented. So many
Yeah.
books, so many pictures, so many paintings. Here we are at our next stop. This is not, one of these historic villas, but I think it is a very important part of the story of Victoria.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Hello!
Nice to see you
Hi.
again.
Nice to see you too. These are serious heritage people. And I think you're also some sort of serious heritage person, but in a very different genre, let's say.
Yes.
This is one of my favorite houses in Victoria to come to, and I definitely wanted to show you to this because it's a little bit off the beaten path. Of course, you've got this very beautiful house. We also have this very beautiful garden, Japanese maple, and lots of other beautiful things planted here. And, art.
Rock art.
Rock art. Shall we start by talking about the house?
Yes, both of the houses either side of us are actually heritage designated. Ours isn't, but we decided we'd embrace the whole heritage thing, and we actually put up the gingerbread to really go to town, because we always love that kind of a feel. And if you ever watch English shows, you'll see these kinds of things.
You say it's not a heritage house, but that doesn't mean it's not of heritage vintage. I mean,
yes, yeah, this one is about 1912.
1912.
I guess that counts, right?
Yeah.
Your wife, she's the artistic genius.
Yes, I would say that's not an understatement. Mary will be walking along a beach and she'll see a rock, and I would see a rock, but she'll see a rock that could be a roast chicken or an egg or oranges. And that's why all over the garden, she's been adding over the years. And it's really just when Mary sees the reactions of people, which is pure joy, she just gets excited to do more. And so now you've got rocks everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like seeing somebody maybe who's had a bad day, and they're walking up and they look, and all of a sudden it's, oh, you get this lightening up of people's moods. And that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah. I get so hungry when I'm here. The banana's new, right? Or how new?
Well, you see, every time you come, you'll see something new.
Okay,
right?
so it's not new at all.
That's right. So this is Mary's website where we have all the pictures. That's not a logo or a sales thing. It's just there's no sales. It's all word of mouth.
One thing that I've always been partial to, and I'm glad to finally have the opportunity to show it, this chocolate wrapped in aluminum foil always looks like it's melting in the sun. I really like that. And of course, there's all the dad jokes. You've got the boxing glove, Rocky. It took me a while before I even got that one.
Is that right?
Rock synthesizer for listening to rock music. But then you actually did compose a song that is not in any way, shape, fashion, or form rock music.
No, it's very mellow, and it was written years ago, but it goes really well with the garden. And my wife said, why don't you put up a little QR code so people can listen? So they do. So they have a nice little experience in watching the garden. Well, I just think it's pretty amazing that you can get a piece of rock to look like this here.
The steak.
The steak. And
Not a mistake at all.
I think it's kind of neat that Mary picked these flowers to make like flames, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. And then you got your fries.
Let's talk about the gardening part, though. Like, this must be so much work. You have this wide variety of different flowers
Right.
here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I'd like to be able to take credit for so much work, but in fact, Mary loves to do the gardening as well.
Okay.
I get to do the hard parts. I rip out the hard things and help to trim it a bit. But honestly, everything you see here is all her vision.
Let's address the Mary in the room. One might be wondering, why is Mary not talking to us?
Well, I'm sure everybody knows somebody who's a little camera shy, and so that's pretty much it.
We have a lot of focus on heritage buildings, and you have like all of it could be very dry, could be very stuffy, could be very serious, but the people who live here refuse to be that way.
Yeah.
And so what you have, you just end up having like places that have like some architectural heritage, places that maybe I would stop by if you didn't have like this unique touch that you and Mary are lending to it. But because you lend that, you just make it actually so much more special.
Yeah.
People don't often necessarily think about themselves as actually a part of history, but we have these electric boxes all over town where, you can see people who are just living their lives, posing for a picture in front of their house, and they're long gone, but we can still see them. And I like to think that whoever is in charge of that kind of initiative in the future,
Yeah.
I would like to think that
It would
your
be.
beautiful rock
Well,
garden.
thank you for that, and
Yeah.
thank you for taking the time to come and see us.
All right, gang. So one more stop. I'd love to take you with us, Steve, but as you can see, you'd have to ride on somebody's shoulders.
Okay.
So you've mentioned the term Italianate architecture a few times, but I realize we haven't really gone into what that means. What is Italianate architecture exactly?
Italianate architecture, actually, funny enough, originated in England in 1802, and where the architecture came from, it was from, of course, all of the English families traveling to Italy and loving the Italian architecture, the villas, the architecture in Tuscany. Then it arrived in North America in about 1840, and it was one of the styles that a lot of the sort of middle class families loved. And here we are at James Bay Inn.
Not Italianate.
Not Italian.
That natural flow of
But
conversation.
This is where Emily Carr passed.
Right. So we've been at her gravestone.
Stone. I don't know a lot about the history of the James Bay Inn. I know the architecture is more that sort of Edwardian.
The first thing I look for is, it's symmetrical, like I would think of an
Yeah.
Edwardian style building.
But, there are also going to be elements of other architecture, like the brackets and the bay windows, which would have been more sort of the Queen Anne styling. But they say that Emily Carr, when she died here, it was for the elderly. She came here.
Oh, okay. So she wasn't staying at a hotel. It was because she was elderly and sick.
That's right.
That makes a lot more sense
Yeah.
based on everything
Yeah.
else I know about her. Because
Yeah.
I was always just like,
why would she stay at a hotel
Yeah.
so close to where she lived?
Do you know,
Right.
am I right in thinking it was built as a hotel though?
It was built as a hotel.
Yeah.
And like I said, it went through, like many of these heritage properties, different usages over time.
Speaking of time, we are kind of on a weird time traveling journey right now because the end of the show is sort of the beginning of Emily Carr's life. We've been going from burial, death, and now we're going to the place of her birth, which is also a great bit of architecture. One last villa to end them all.
So I love Italianate architecture, not so much aesthetically, but just the idea that these are people who sort of are reconstructing what they imagine Northern Italian villas probably look like, but like they're not doing it in Italy, and they're Not really, right?
Well, the English brought it here,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, of course, yeah. But the English people doing it were just remembering Italy themselves.
It's essentially the architectural answer to Hawaiian pizza.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, yeah. My understanding is Italians really don't like that. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure how they feel about Italian and architecture.
Hopefully a little bit better. All right, so here we finally are, the Carr House. And I actually organized a little surprise for the two of you. We have a poet laureate emeritus, John Barton,
Hi, Johnny.
here to read us a poem about Emily Carr.
Nice
Hello.
to see you all.
So John is actually an expert on Emily Carr in a certain
Oh, I
sort of
wouldn't
way.
go that
You
but
wouldn't
far.
go that far.
Yeah.
You're somebody who's inspired by her work.
Yeah. Been involved in her legacy for 40 years as a poet.
So what have you got here for us today?
I have a poem from my book, West of Darkness, which is spoken in her voice. So it's a persona that I've assumed. And I'm going to read a poem about her parents, about a grapevine that her father had cultivated on the side of the house. Mother was gentle. She never wore pearls. When strong enough, she would rise from her sick bed, tuck us in. Her fingers at rest on our foreheads, her fingers a moment of warmth. Her eyes lit by the coal lamp brightening the side of my bed until she blew the flame out. The smoke from the wick a lullaby her breath drew from her lips, her leaning forward lost to the dark. I don't ever remember her closing the door. Maybe once I heard her skirt brushing the floorboards as she crossed the hall to her room. Whenever I think of it, I am still 12, falling asleep with a doll I seldom cared for, strangely content in my arms. A mother had let her face melt in the sun. Mother's dying was like the grapevine father would tend. It overwhelmed one side of the house. He named it Isabella. I resented him, thought he loved her every twist more than mother, more than myself. I was wrong. No, as mother knew, the comfort he found in pruning, each cut giving shape to Isabella's dark curves. I wish mother had told me. Such knowledge is climbing too late with unruly limbs about the rooms of my flesh. No longer young, long used to sitting alone here under this alder in father's praying chair, sternly sighing amen, as it always did under his weight. I examine each twist of vine in the leaf-mottled light of my afternoon garden, where my dogs cavort like children, chasing their tails. Remembering that time, what little I know of it, is a tangle of growth and dead wood. Like Isabella's fruit, its ripeness is sour, such bruised skin soon to collapse inward, wrinkle round darkness. Mother was gentle, was father's reflection. Her gray eyes fine steel. Strong enough once she took me, his truant, into the forest. We picnicked, the two of us, all afternoon. I made daisy chains, while every moment she hemmed, with straight seams, broad folds of linen into a stiff apron for small. We both wore daisies. We smiled secretly at high tea when we got home. Mother was so gentle, and now I am old.
Beautiful.
Well, thanks.
It's a real privilege standing here. You know, you're talking about the trees, you're talking about the house, and I'm looking at it. If you haven't tried listening to poetry at the place where it was written or that inspired it, you got to try it. It's great. Yeah. So you wrote that quite a while ago.
Maybe 1979, 80, something like that, when I was quite young myself. So to me, Emily Carr would have been an old woman. She was probably, in her early 60s, probably younger than I am now.
All of these years later, you can relate to the narrator.
In a different way, yeah.
Society as a whole kind of looked at her as a black sheep at the time.
And she was a contrarian who felt that her painting was unappreciated. I often think she did it at great personal price, but she saw the limitations that society was imposing on her,
Yes.
as a woman particularly. A phrase of hers that always attracts me to describe herself as a little old lady on the edge of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I think that really encapsulated how she felt as an artist unappreciated here. She was always
Resourceful.
You know, she optimized her studio space, so she had the chairs on pulleys and pulled them
That's
up to
right.
the ceiling and would only drop them down if she wanted you to stay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, she was so authentic to herself.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, like many great artists, she wasn't recognized in life, but in death.
yeah, but I think enough of it happened.
Yeah.
She had that sense of satisfaction, being appreciated. There's that passage in the journals where there's a sale and she lists the amount of money that she made in the sales painting by painting. It's like, to her, an astronomical sum of $400, which would have been sizable.
But even with inflation.
Yeah.
Can't
But,
compare
you know,
to what
she's
they were.
kind of dumbfounded.
She definitely had allies and friends also in Indigenous communities. I mean, Clee-Wick, which if I remember right, that translates to laughing spirit. But I also know that some people aren't entirely happy about that today through a 2025 lens.
Yes, there is some criticism perhaps of what she was painting at the time. Coming from an affluent family, she was very fortunate. She was able to travel to these communities. She was able to document those things, document a little bit of history in not only her writings, but also in her artwork. And today it's creating conversation. We don't know how people are going to look at this in another 2,500 years from now. So
Yeah, it's sort of unfortunate, but it's probably inevitable given the treatment of the First Nations at the
Yes.
time that the best known early chroniclers of Indigenous art and culture were probably going to be settlers, right? Well,
yes.
That's regrettable, but probably wasn't ever going to be another way given what society then was like. So.
And I mean, we can do our best to sort of address that in the way that we move forward.
Yes.
And I do think Emily was a very progressive voice for the time.
I think if she were alive today, her values would more mirror the present, as our values, if we lived back in her time, might reflect those values as well. So I kind of think one has to temper one's criticism or disapproval with a certain kind of humility, because it's so easy to criticize and remove oneself from the criticism.
I was born in the 80s, and the values back then very different than the values in the 2020s. And so I have been on a learning journey throughout my life. And I do think that it's also worth saying that as people evolve throughout their lives, they can become better people. My impression of Carr is that she was very much on a journey of trying to be the best person she could be. She did make mistakes.
It sort of sounds, I don't know, it sounds like we're talking about this in a very, as though there's some like dark, the scandal here is painted some Indigenous works and it profited as
Well,
as a
maybe
result,
the
right?
scandal is that we know Indigenous art through the paintings.
Teresa's going to give us a little bit of a tour in the house if you'd like to join.
Okay.
we're going to talk about the architecture today, which is Italianate villa architecture, described by architects as a picturesque Italianate villa style. And what that means is asymmetrical. And I know you love the symmetry.
I do, yeah.
But at the time that the house was built, there was no bay windows on the south side. The top bay was added after Richard Carr died by his daughter Edith. So that it was asymmetrical. Now it's a very symmetrical, beautiful home. Some of the characteristics of the Italianate villa style is, the sort of sloped, long overhanging eaves. It's a bit minimalist compared to like the Queen Anne style. Also the tall arched windows, also very characteristics of the Italianate villa style. During the remodel process, they went through a lot of UV lighting, analyzing paint, that type of thing. So the color of the home is very, very consistent with what the coloring of the home would have been at the time. It was built in 1863, and the architects, like the other two homes we visited earlier today, was Wright and Saunders.
Since we talk about the family a little bit, when did it pass out of the hands of the Carr family?
Oh, well, the girls sold it in 1938, and then it went into private ownership. And then in 1964, when the government actually named it a National Historic Site, a local member of Parliament purchased the home. He took out a second mortgage on his home to purchase the home. He then had Peter Cotton, another architect, come in, and because there had been so many changes over time when it was a boarding house, they wanted to take it back to what it actually looked like when Emily grew up here. But the real renovation process started in 1976 to 79, and that renovation was led by Stuart Stark.
Shall we take a look inside?
We will take a look inside. Okay. And this is the grand foyer of the Carr home. And one thing that's really wonderful is that during the restoration process, they found an original panel of the marble wallpaper, which we can see up in the corner here, which sort of inspired the rest of the faux finish panels that we see today. What I can tell you is the staircase, the banister, is original, and most of the wood, as for the exterior of the home, is the California redwood. California redwood was also used throughout the home. Since it was at the time not considered an expensive wood, all of it is faux finished. It was made to look like a wood finish of very high quality. And this is Richard's study. Now, something that did happen in 1863 and beyond is that the head of the household document everything, every piece of furniture they bought, when they bought it, even how much they spent on it sometime. When they were going through the renovation process, you know, a lot of what they were found was because of Richard's diary, also Emily's books, which describe the interior of the home. Unfortunately, there wasn't pictures taken of the interiors. This is actually not the original carpet, but a reproduction of the carpet that would have been in this room. And it was actually tracked back to a merchant in San Francisco. Another treasure that we have here is the original Carr family Bible. And what the family Bible does is it's sort of like a diary, a record of births, of deaths, of marriages. Of course, we don't have any actually Carr original paintings just because of the climate control.
Right.
That type of thing.
Yeah, no, for
And
very obvious
security,
reasons. Yeah.
security reasons. But what we do have is we have a reproduction of a sketch that Emily did of her father.
Oh, so that's what he
And
looked
can you
like.
guess how old she was when she did that sketch? 10
10?
years. Is that what you
Wow.
said?
Yeah, 10.
10. She was 10 years old. Yeah.
How
And
do you?
I just did the math,
Yeah.
knowing when she was born and when he died.
okay, oh, there we go. This is actually not from the Carr House, but it's a floor safe that would have come from Richard's business. He had a merchant shop on Wharf Street at the time. So that is why that is here.
So that's from the actual shop?
That's from
Oh,
the
wow.
actual shop. Yeah, yeah.
So we have the original Carr Bible and
Yeah.
then the
It
original
would have been, yeah.
Carr safe,
Right.
Yeah.
but not the original Carr pit.
Oh.
Cha-ching!
Oh.
And you know, today what this room represents is it actually represents a tribute to the Carr family. And we call this the Wall of Emily. So it has Emily throughout her life. This picture is of Emily when she was 16. And I mean, she was an animal lover. She actually trained crows to attack people she didn't like, especially
Okay.
her older sisters, missionary friends.
I can see it.
All the Carr sisters were were, professional and had good careers in their own right. One being a teacher. I believe it was Edith who started the YWCA here in Victoria. If you'll see in the Bible, there's only 2 marriages. One is of Mother Emily and Richard's marriage, and the second is Clara. And she got married in the room right next door, the formal room, which is the parlor. And I think Emily would be so proud today because this house, not only do they have like writing classes upstairs, but they also display local artist work.
I only actually noticed this tiny sculpture on a visit to the Carr House a couple months ago, but you pass by it every time you pass by the Empress Hotel.
Yes.
It's a much larger version of that sculpture.
Yeah. Life size. Yeah, and
A little bit larger,
it's designed to be interactive because it's almost at eye level, when you walk by it. Commissioned by an Edmonton artist, Barbara Patterson. And actually the launching of it was done in 2010, and that was the National Women's Day. So, I mean, really how appropriate was that? It's called My Emily. She's got a sketch pad, a pencil. She's got her monkey, Woo, which she actually had a monkey named Woo, and her little dog, Billy. It really reflects who she was as a woman. And this is the Carr House dining room. So this would have been considered a very formal room at the time. This is where the Carrs would have had their formal dinners. Currently, it is dedicated to Emily's writings. Her books are on display here. More importantly, to architectural tour. When they went through the UV lighting, the paint, they did find a little etching in the parlor, which they were able to recreate and again find the wallpaper. But here in this room, they could not find the wallpaper. This wallpaper is actually from the House of All Sorts. So this is not consistent with the Carr House, but it is consistent with Emily's story. One thing I like to point out is like this beautiful niche area. Because the niche was added at a later date, in the original pictures that we have of the property, there are 2 windows. So 2 additional windows would have been added on the south elevation, letting some beautiful, beautiful light in. The furniture that is in this space is not original, but the era is original.
It's
so
era appropriate.
It's
right.
era appropriate. It was purchased by an estate. The dining room table was actually used by Emily after her father had passed, and once Edith was in control of the household, as a studio. This is where she actually taught art. Now, Emily writes in Book of Small that there was a red tablecloth on this table when they had their formal dinners. So my goal is to find and match one up to the burgundy red up there. My architectural tour, I sort of go into the styling of the furnishings as well, and how they're period appropriate. But I won't bore you with that today.
Might be a bit much for the purposes of today's program.
Exactly.
So,
well, it's wonderful to share. Yeah, and like I say, I think that Emily would be, so proud of how the home sort of welcomes artists and writers today.
Irishman, Englishman, and a Scotchman went into a British pub. They're sitting in front of each of their beers, and the first English guy says, "Bartender, there's a fly in my beer." Bartender comes up, takes the fly and throws it away like that. I'm not going to finish this. Am I really going to do that? Okay, so you did your...
well, now we're all waiting to hear how it ends.
All right, well, you asked for it. You asked for it. So the Scotchman, he's sitting in front of his beer, and he says, sees the fly, and he just goes, get out of there, you, and he goes like that, right? And the Irishman looks at his fly in his beer, looks at the other two, he says, "Spit it out, you little devil, spit it out." All right. All right, okay.